So can we have the second paper, please? Because, yes, that's it. My subject is why peer review, and I should add perhaps why and where is it going. And the reason why we need peer review, or have had in the publishing world, is because what is referred to as a publication mountain. For example, every year in excess of 1 million publications are published after the peer review process, and therefore this highlights the issue. I would like to stress at this very start, it is there to review the quality of the material being submitted for publication, and does its best in achieving this. But it's not a foolproof system for detection of scientific fraud. And that is important to remember. Its main functions are outlined here: dissemination of knowledge, archiving of canonical knowledge base, quality control of published information, assignment of priority and credit to authors for the work. But the paradigm is the publication of scholarly articles. That's the raison d'etre, as it were. There are, however, other areas in which it is needed, and hence why. And these are shown here, or highlighted them in yellow: allocation of research funding at national level, PR influences what science enters the public domain, and that's very important, where it is published and its impact. For example, the more prestigious journal, the greater the likely impact of the publication, as we know. But also to assess, in some countries at least, such as the UK, the research rating of university departments, which then dictates the amount of money they get from the government. The reasons why we need it are outlined here. It establishes the validity of the work. Are the research results credible? Establishes that the design and methodology are appropriate. Establish, when appropriate, that the ethical requirements have been met. This applies, of course, to clinical trials, but also to animal investigations. To establish the significance of the work and its relevance to other important data. To establish that the work is original, and that indeed the results being published are new. To establish that the paper refers properly to the work performed by others in the past on which the paper is based, and to decide on whether that's the sort of role of the editor of a journal and the peer review process, whether the materials being submitted can be published. Not needs to, but can be published. The process is well known as far as surgical endoscopy is concerned. The submission is online, as with all other journals. In-house, we have a sort of peer review that rejects outright something like 20% of papers because they do not fulfill the requirements to authors, or they're outwit the remit of the journal, etc. But the rest are put to a peer review system which has something in excess of 650 people, and on this, the editor bases his decision to accept, invite resubmission, or reject outright. Two types of peer review. I think there's a continuous debate, and I don't have time or remit to cover these. anonymous peer review or open peer review. By and large, most journals, including surgical endoscopy, use anonymous peer review. The authors do not know the identity of the referees, whereas with the open system, the referees' identities are known to the authors or made known to the authors. Arguments for and against both are shown here. My own view is that there's not been a reported study that has significantly shown that one system is better than the other. We need to improve, certainly, the efficiency of peer review. And this is what we have done as far as surgical endoscopy is concerned. Firstly, lightening the burden of the reviewers, and I think we decided that no reviewer on our list receives more than one paper a month. Setting new research in context is another important consideration, and it's important to realize this. We fast-track some publications, particularly if we consider them to be of importance to the science and practice of surgery. But also, I think it's very important, this has been overlooked, is trying to improve the quality of the review process. And it's interesting to me that in the academic field, there are very few peer reviewing training courses, and this is one of the reasons why the EAS is taking the initiative on this and will hold the first peer review course next year at this Congress in Geneva. The role of peer reviewers, I think, is important, widely agreed that they improve the quality of what is published, as evidenced by the fact that as many as 80% of published papers receive some form of revision as a result of comments made by the peer reviewers. This is the Association of Learned and Professional Society called ALPSP, of which I have a member for years. Conducted two major surveys and one intermediate. The first in 1999, and this was designed to assess authors' views. The other one also carried out in between was designed to find out the views of the readers, and the authors' views was sought again in 2001. Basically, the first survey showed that 70% of authors were satisfied or very satisfied with the peer review process as it stands. And this is the main message from the first survey. The second survey, PR remained important with virtually no difference in the satisfaction rate, but when asked to predict what would be the most common form of quality control in years to come, there were some important responses. 52 replied that the traditional peer review would remain as is, but 27% replied that peer review would be supplemented in due course by what is known as post-publication commentary. I'll refer to this in some detail. 16% said that the referees would no longer or should no longer be anonymous, and 1% opted for the post-publication commentary only as the form of peer review, and 45% expected to see some changes in the peer review system within 5 years. What are the disadvantages? It's, as I said, poor detection fraud. It has some bias in the past. This was gender related, no longer so. It favors publication of papers with positive results. There are language issues which afflict all editors, in that some very good papers are written in substandard English, which is a problem that's very frequently. It is an inherently conservative process, self-serving as it were. It's poor at assessment of multidisciplinary work. And in my view, I think it's inefficient process. As far as surgical endoscopy, we give reviewers 3 weeks to complete the review. And as far as surgical endoscopy, European office is concerned, 50% of reviewers do not even reply. And for this and other reason, I think peer review is under pressure. And as a result, particularly of cases that have emerged in the last 10 years. This is a paper in the BMJ suggesting perhaps the end of the peer review show. And you've all read about these people who committed major scientific fraud despite publication of their work in truly major journals, including the Lancet and Nature. So a number of online alternatives, or threats, I should say, to conventional peer review have been made on the premise that advances in the electronic technology offer a more effective and convenient way of dealing with the problem. And many established journals have now moved on to having an online version as well. And of course, the advent of the internet has facilitated the entire process. You all know, or should know, of this EAX server, which was founded by Paul Ginsberg at the Los Alamos Laboratory. It is an electronic archive and distribution server. And in it, in fact, he invites, it's for physics and mathematics, top quality. And he invites authors to submit their work on his server. Once posted on the server, anyone can comment on what is published. Say it's rubbish, or say it's okay, but you've overlooked this, the usual comments. And at the end of the process, the author replies. If he replies positively, Ginsberg retains his paper and refers to it as refereed, or takes his paper off the server. It's been so successful, it gets, over the last 10 years, an average daily hit of over 3,000. And as you can see, it's used by a lot of people in physics and mathematics. So, peer review versus peer commentary. I think marked difference between the two. Peer review, as we know, traditionally is restricted to 2 to 3 referees, whereas peer commentary is open to a much larger group of people who can comment on the work. Advocates of change towards peer commentary say that the peer review is probably outdated because it was used to constrain the amount of material published when journals were all in print form. And this is no longer needed in the near cost-free environment and unlimited environment of the internet. So I think there is an argument that peer review, as far as publication is concerned, needs perhaps to change. Acceptable in some field, peer commentary, some say not in others, such as the biomedical field. I don't accept personally this. Post-publication commentary can provide quality only, however, if the required scholars and experts in the field comment on the work. All right, so in consensus generally is that peer commentary is valuable, but only as an adjunct to peer review and not as its replacement. Smith has suggested this very complex deconstruction model to replace peer review, whereby storage and provision of access and control is all made on the web. There are a number of logistic problems to this system, and I don't think many people would accept its validity at the moment, anyway. This is what I suggest, a hybrid system. The author, for example, submits online to a specific journal, such as surgical endoscopy. The editors, after initial in-house review, decides to publish the papers and puts them on a server as unrefereed, but at the same time solicits open peer review, not just from the peer review board, but from anybody else who is expert in the field. On the basis of comments received, the editors then decide to reject the paper outright when it's removed from the server, or invite the author for a resubmission. And if he deals effectively with the comments, it's accepted. If the paper is accepted, it is then identified as refereed, and it replaces the unrefereed version and stays on the server indefinitely. These referees' papers then are published in print version if the journal, such as surgical endoscopy, has a print copy. I think this represents the best of both worlds, that is, peer review based on peer commentary. So in conclusion, I think peer review remains essential for quality assurance of published scientific research. It does, however, need to change, and in respect of surgical endoscopy, the editorial board and joint committee should initiate discussions on how we may lead in this field amongst the surgical journals. My own view is, as I have expressed it. Thank you for your attention.